What is going on, Tenno? My name is Defton, and I am here bringing you a video on this brand new weapon that came out with the War Within that you get at the end of the quest called the Orvius, and it is interesting. You find the parts by killing the Kuva Guardians, which spawn when you are trying to destroy the Kuva siphons. So let's just get right into it. First of all, the weapon seems to be more of an ornament weapon rather than a practical weapon. Most glaives, other than one, the Serata, I think that's how you pronounce it. But the one that does toxic damage, that one I feel is more practical than this one, because toxic damage, just any elemental damage, you could chain with other elements and therefore create more damage because it stacks. So I feel like that would be more practical than this, but also this has its practicalities as well. So let me just explain. So first of all, let's go right into the stats. The weapon kind of has low stats to begin with. It actually has the highest physical damage, meaning overall damage, of any of the glaives, but it has the lowest attack speed. Most of the glaives' attack speeds are around 1.0, 1.1. This is at 0.75, so it's quite a bit lower than the other glaives. So you can see how that can kind of be troublesome. But it makes up for it in damage. Most of the other glaives have about 35 to 40 physical damage or elemental damage. This one has 50, so significantly larger. And then on top of that, it has very low crit chance, 10%, dirt low. You're not going to be able to do anything with crits. You'll get crits every once in a while, obviously, but you can't really do a crit build with this. Also, it has primarily slash damage. The status chance is also at 10%, so getting that higher will be difficult. There are ways to get it up, but it's not going to be enough to be like, a real status weapon. But I'll get more into that in a second. Charge attacks, it's going to be doing 150 damage on base, meaning when you throw the weapon, it's going to be doing a base of 150 damage. Slam attacks do 100. Slide attacks do 250, which that seems to be the norm with most melee weapons. The slide attack does the most damage. And then wall attacks does 150. So the interesting thing about this weapon is its passive. Its passive states that it traps enemies. Well, actually it states that it controls enemies and it utilizes them like puppets, which is not necessarily true. When I read that, I thought it would be something where you throw the glaive or you throw the Orvius and it actually allows you to become or control that enemy. So I don't know, maybe it would do something like the enemy would be on your side for a limited period of time while that glaive is on them, or something like that. I think that would have been more effective than what it does currently. And what it does currently is it traps enemies in this thing that looks like Titania's one of her abilities, the one where she has, I think it's called Lantern, where she kind of traps an enemy and it's just like floating there ragdolling. It's kind of like that, but a little bit different because the enemy is stationary. I know that there is a focus tree that has an ability that's just like it. I can't remember the name right now, but one thing about this is it's not just that they're stationary, it actually does damage over time, and it actually has 3 ticks, and it does damage over these 3 ticks, and at the end, it actually explodes and returns to you. You also have to be careful because the explosion actually damages you as well. I've actually killed myself a couple of times because I was standing too close to the explosion. As I stated before, this thing is definitely not a crit weapon, so you're not going to be putting any steel charge or anything like that to, bring up the crit. It won't really do much. It doesn't really have too much status either, but one thing that you actually can do is do an elemental build, which I'll get into in a second. Full slash damage, you can't really do that. As I said, the weapon is primarily a slash damage weapon, but you can't really do just a full slash damage build. You can, but it will fall off late game, and it will be a lot harder to kill enemies at higher level. Channeling. This is kind of interesting because in order to actually use the special ability of this weapon, you actually have to channel and throw the weapon above the enemy. And it does an effect that is similar to the cinematic in The War Within, where your Warframe gets, stunned by Teshin's, Orvius, and it does that to an enemy. With that, I thought, maybe this is a channeling weapon. So I tried to do a channeling build, and it worked for the most part, but once I got to late game, it did not work. It just didn't work. I tried killing a level 60 enemy, and it struggled with that. So I wouldn't recommend doing that just because of that. What I would recommend doing is putting a life strike on your mod configuration, and you will be good, because when you throw the weapon, because it's charged after you throw it, and it's circling over the enemy and it's charged, I actually noticed that life strike is still in effect when it's actually hovering over an enemy. The best thing to do, from my experience and from my several builds that I've done, is building with corrosive, or something that is specific to an enemy type that you're going to be going up against. Building with corrosive, I found it worked best, but that's just because of the test enemy that I used. I used a gunner, a heavy gunner, and a heavy gunner has a lot of armor, so that corrosive just melted their armor. And then after that, I switched the weapon as they were still floating in the air to my pox, which I have set to viral, and that cut their health in half. And then from there, my pox just took over because of the the damage over time. So one thing that I noticed that was pretty interesting was it actually ensnares bosses, which I wasn't expecting, but it doesn't ensnare all the bosses. I actually tried it on Lephantos. It didn't work, which I should have expected, but yeah, it didn't work on Lephantos, not at all. So don't try it on Lephantos, that didn't work. But almost every other boss, actually no, every other boss that I've tried it on, and I've tried it on Vor, I've tried it on Sargus Ruk, I've tried it on, basically a bunch of different bosses. I didn't try it on every single one, which is why I'm saying most. But for all the ones that I've tried, it actually does ensnare them. But as it's hovering above them, it does frost damage, so it slows them just in case they are an enemy that is able to move while it's affecting them. So that's definitely something to consider with this weapon. It's a good weapon to an extent. There are some issues with it that could actually lead to limited late game use, especially by veteran players when we have an abundance of other mods that work better. But it would be interesting to see how it works in Conclave and, PvP and stuff like that. And I definitely want to try and use it in the dark sectors once that comes out. I want to see how it affects that. But for right now, this is all we have. And I'm not sure if I would recommend this weapon. Don't rush to get it. Like, it's a cool weapon to have, don't get me wrong. You should still get it. It's fun to use. But don't rush to get it. I rushed it with Plat. I kind of regret it. It's fun to use, as I said, but for what it took to get it, the amount of Kuva to get, and the farming that I had to do in order to get the weapon, it wasn't really worth it. So I would say take your time with this, get it when you can, don't rush it. It's an okay weapon, but it looks cool. That's it. Alright, thank you guys so much for watching. Like if you liked the video, subscribe if you want to see more Warframe stuff, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace.